Hey everybody, Mr. Drake here again. I have, or Ookie, we are going today, we're still carrying on with our living thing stuff, and I've got lots more stuff coming in that vein. However, right now, I am going to talk about how we can tell where a living thing comes from by how it looks and how it acts. And I have two animals here, both of them, one of them types you've already seen. One of them is crested gecko. So look at this. This is Jewel. This is one of my daughter's lizards. She is a... Whoa, she's backwards. You don't need to see her bum. Here is Jewel. She is a crested gecko, and she comes from the rainforest. And this is Lucrezia. She is a leopard gecko, and she comes from the desert. So we're going to look here at the differences and how we know where they come from. So let's look at their tails. In the rainforest, there's a lot of food, but there's a lot of trees. So if you look at Jewel's tail, see, look, it can grab onto stuff. It's not very fat. Geckos store extra food in their and water in their tails, just like a camel stores extra water and fat in its hump. The geckos store extra food. Well, they store fat in there. And geckos store their extra energy or their fat in their tails. So look, she's good at hanging on to stuff with her tails. Her tail. She also has little, almost like little adhesive pads or little toe pads that help her hang on to trees. If you look really closely there, see that? And her claws can get sucked up like this, almost like a cat. Right? So their claws aren't always out. They're usually up, and she's got little sucker pads. Now let's look at the leopard gecko's feet. The leopard gecko lives in the desert, in holes, not in the rainforest in trees. Look at her tail. It's fat. She's storing all her extra fat in her tail, so that when it's dry or when there's not a lot of food around, she's got something to use. And that's more important in the desert than it is in the jungle. And does she need to hang on to anything with this? No, it'd be pretty useless if she tried, because there's not much there. Now, let's look at her feet. She can't suck up her claws, and they're little tiny, but they're very strong. And they're there for digging, and her claws are always out, so she can dig around in holes in the desert. And she doesn't need a big sucker pads on her toes, because she's always on the ground and in holes, whereas she is always up in trees. So we can tell, just by looking at her, this one comes from trees in the jungle, and this one comes from holes and between rocks in the rainforest. And also look at this. I'm going to get my daughter to hold this other one. Now, look at this. She has eyelids. If I poke her up here, she can close her eye, but she's not wanting to. She's too chill for that. Anyhow, she has eyelids. Because in the desert, there's lots of dust, there's sandstorms, stuff like that. When that's coming out, you don't always want to be like this, right? You got to be able to close your eyes so sand doesn't get in there. So she actually has eyelids, this desert one. See, look at that. And this one cannot close her eyes. She can kind of push them back. She can lick them with her tongue to dry them. And they actually have a little scale on them. When they shed, you can see the scale. But she has no eyelids, and she can't like make tears or anything like that to clean them. But she doesn't need to, because she's from the jungle. So she can always have her eyes open, just like a snake does. Okay? Also, if you feel her... Too bad I can't bring these to class anymore, because if you feel her skin, for one thing, she can change color really well, which helps her camouflage. And her skin is very, very soft and velvety and very thin. She doesn't have to worry about losing a lot of heat or losing a lot of moisture in the desert or in the rainforest, because the temperature is kind of mild. It's always kind of humid. If you're in the desert and you don't want to dry up and overheat, it's better to have thicker, bumpier skin. And Lucrezia here has thicker, bumpier skin. So if you were to feel her, it's harder, it's kind of bumpy. Neither of these are slimy, neither of them are hard and crusty feeling, but you can certainly tell that she is more bumpy and thicker skinned than she is. So, just a few differences Might go over some kids' heads, but some kids always really enjoy this when we go through how we know where something is every year. And you guys can look at different animals around, and just by what it has on its body, you can tell where it lives. Even when you're out in the community wandering around, you see the beak-seeks, you see the birds, you see the omagokadakes, the gophers. You can figure out how they live just by looking at them. All right. I hope that helps. I hope you guys liked seeing the lizards. And lizards. Bye. And I will see you again soon. I hope everybody's having a great spring. Miss y'all. Bye.